welcome back to the Phillies Fan Podcast. It's been a while. It's been a really long time, but we are back. Episode number 44. I am your host, Jaden Harper. Like I said, it's been a while. Been a little bit over a month since we've been recording, but I'm back. And there's a lot has happened in that time span since the last episode. A lot has changed for the Phillies. We'll talk about a lot of stuff today. Talk about this last series against the Mets. We'll talk about the draft, the All-Star game, even the upcoming trade deadline, which is, as of recording and when this does come out, it is 2 weeks from tonight. So a really big time for the Phillies. But before we get started, I do remind you to make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to stay tuned for whenever I post more content. So let's start with this past week's series. They took on the New York Mets to open up the second half of the season. Thursday was the opener. They moved it up an hour and also up a day. Put it on ESPN national television game. Aaron Nola got the ball for the Phillies in the first game out of the All-Star break, and he pitched relatively well. Only gave up 3 runs. All of them were extra base hit home run. They're all of them were home runs. So he really got hurt by the solo home run ball. But a really solid outing for Aaron Nola working into the 7th inning. One of his better outings of the season, but the offense just wasn't there. Trea did hit a home run, which is a really good sign for the Phillies. Hit 2 home runs this weekend against the Mets. But that was the only offense they were able to generate. They lost that one 4-1. Now you go to Saturday. You have the day off on Friday. Now to Saturday, Jesus Luzardo, the All-Star, on the mound for the Phillies. Another great start. He pitches 5 innings, 5 really good innings, and the Phillies were able to take care of the Mets pitching. Shabaniah and Kodai Senga, for the most part, they were able to take care of it. And honestly, they kind of cruised to a victory. You have a guy like Kyle Schwarber hitting a first inning 2-run homer. Trea Turner hit another home run, so he had 2 home runs this weekend, like I said. Just a really good offensive performance, good offensive showing for the Phillies, something that they needed. Getting up to 6 runs, getting early lead, so you don't have to really worry about it later in the game. You can have a guy like Chase Sugar go in and get 2 innings of mop-up work, no runs allowed, something that he's needed because he's had a couple outings of struggle. So really good for the Phillies getting through another, I would say, big game. You want to get those games in each series to get wins. And then lastly, Sunday, a series loss with a loss on Sunday, falling this time 6-1. And it shows a bigger issue for the Phillies is the 5th starter, the 5th guy every day. What usually becomes a bullpen game. Alan Rangel started this one, didn't look great. And the Phillies offense, again, just wasn't able to come alive. Alec Boehm was the only run in this one with a solo home run later in the game. Noah McLean had a really good start against the Phillies. 10 strikeouts, proving he's a really good pitcher. Noah McLean is a great pitcher for the New York Mets. He is their best pitcher right now. And for the Mets, they're in a weird position, right? They're going to be sellers at the deadline. They're currently in last place in the National League East. You have a guy like Freddie Peralta, Clay Holmes. Didn't see them in the series. Clay Holmes still working back from his injury. You have guys like Luke Weaver, AJ Minter that even the Phillies are going to be looking at, for their needs in their roster. But for the biggest thing is that, you don't want to lose a series like this to a last place team. Losing a series to a last place team is bad, but even when it's the Mets, it's worse. It's the first time in 4 years that the Phillies have lost a series at home to the New York Mets, going back all the way to 2022. And it's just it's a bad series loss. It's not how you want to open up the second half, because you have teams that are taking advantage of when you lose, and now they're winning. A team like Atlanta, even though it's only a game that they gained, it's just still a big game, right? You have a team like the Cubs, who took 2 out of 3 from Minnesota. You want to keep on pace with these teams. You're not going to be able to keep on pace with them if you're losing series to a last place Mets team. But for the Phillies, it's the second half. They've never had good starts to the second half. Last year they struggled. 2024 was horrendous. It was a really, really bad struggle. They came out against Pittsburgh, lost that series, lost to Minnesota, lost to Cleveland, lost to the Yankees, lost to the Mariners. It was just a really bad stretch of baseball for the Phillies back in 2024. 2023 wasn't much better either. 2022 wasn't good either. So they've always struggled coming out of the break. But they kind of have to turn it around really quickly because they have the Dodgers coming up. They have the Yankees. They have even the Marlins, which is a big series down in South Beach, right? So the Phillies kind of have to turn it around really, really quick if they want to be in a good position going in to really the last stretch of the season, going in from mid-August until the end of the season. But this is going to be a key period of time. And there's a lot of stuff where it's like, whoa, how did the Phillies even get here to this point? It's incredible that the Phillies are in the position with the amount of wins that they have with essentially three hitters, three pitchers, and three relievers all season long. They've really only gotten consistent production from Brandon Marsh, Kyle Schwarber, and Bryce Harper offensively this season. All three of them were all stars. Marsh has kind of decreased his productivity at the plate recently. Schwarber and Harper have still been the two best hitters for the Phillies this season. You're lacking production from a bat like Trea Turner. You're lacking production from a bat like JT Realmuto, lacking a bat production from Bowman Stott. Even bench guys like Edmundo Sosa aren't giving the production you thought they were going to give necessarily at the beginning of the season, right? When you look at the rotation, you have three really good pitchers, probably the three best pitchers out of any group in all of baseball: Christopher Sanchez, Zach Wheeler, and Jesus Luzardo. You have Aaron Nola, who's been off and on, but his ERA is over a 5 at the end of the day, so that is not great. And then your fifth starter, you had Andrew Painter, didn't work out at all. And now you're throwing together bullpen games every fifth day, really, at the end of the day, because Alan Redhall has not fully worked out as a starter for the Phillies this season. And then you look at the bullpen, which has probably been the biggest weakness this season for the Phillies. Brad Keller has not really worked out. Now he's out for the season. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. You have a guy like Jose Alvarado who's really struggled this season. Tanner Banks has really struggled this season. So again, you really have, Ryohan Girard, who was an all-star, Orion Kettering, who could have easily been an all-star, but is having a really good year. And you have a guy like Jonathan Boland, who arguably is your third best reliever right now. And that is something you want to really, to fortify every position, which makes the deadline a little bit harder when you have so many glaring, I would say glaring needs going into the deadline. You have all these teams that are kind of right now in a better position than you. You have a team like Milwaukee who's playing better baseball right now. You have a team like the Dodgers who are still going to be the best team in baseball. They're not even fully healthy. You have a team like Chicago who's starting to play much better baseball after a really rough stretch. Atlanta is still going to be really good. They still are not healthy, right? They don't have Ronald Acuna Jr. back, who is one of their best players, so they're still going to get even healthier, right? So if you're the Phillies, you just got to, the guys who get paid to play at a high level need to start stepping up and playing at that high level. A guy like Trea Turner, it's looking much better. He's definitely turned it around over this last month and a half. He's played a lot better baseball for the Phillies. And it's been a big part of the reason why they've been able to close so much ground on the Atlanta Braves. Without Trea Turner, the Phillies would be in a much weirder position right now than what they are as a group. But again, his production hasn't been there all season long. You have a guy like Brandon Marsh who had a really great start to the season, but the numbers are starting to fade a little bit. He was an all-star starter, but again, the numbers are starting to fade now for Brandon Marsh, which is a little bit concerning considering he has been your third best hitter behind Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper. And you have a guy like JT. JT has not been great behind the plate with his bat. I mean, he does have 10 home runs, but again, hasn't been a great 10 home runs. You have a guy like Alec Bohm, who again has not been great at the plate. Bryce's Stott has not been great at the plate. So the Phillies have a lot to fix going into the deadline now, with only essentially three hitters, three pitchers, and three relievers. But the Phillies already made a move, and it was a really big one. It's worked out really well. I want to talk about the breakout of Derek Hill this season. What a season he is having since getting traded from the White Sox to the Phillies, hitting over 300, 3 home runs, 8 RBIs, 2 incredible catches, out of this world catches, 2 of the best catches we've seen all season and in a couple years. And he has been a really good outfielder for the Phillies. But again, the Phillies aren't playing him as much as they probably should. His numbers are better against lefties than against righties. He's only been starting, though, against the lefties. He hasn't been starting against the righties. And that's a really interesting, complex when you just look at what the numbers look like, considering his average is higher against righties than it is against lefties on the season, right? And for a guy who has been your best, arguably your best outfielder over the last month, you're not playing him every day. He's only getting a couple games in every week, right? He's only started once in the 3-game series against the Mets. That's not sustainable for a guy you're gonna need down the stretch. You're gonna need playing every day when you get down to October, when you get down to the big games, when you face the big lefties. You want a guy like him getting constant reps, and he's not getting that opportunity because of whatever reason. I guess they want to see the lefties more against the right-handed pitchers, but again, those guys have not been producing to the level they could. So I really do think Derek Hill should be becoming an everyday player at this point for this Phillies roster with how it's built right now. After the trade deadline is a different discussion, but right now Derek Hill should be playing every day for the Phillies because he's been arguably their best outfielder over the last month. Not every acquisition comes out well, though. You have a guy like I talked about already. Brad Keller has not been up to what the Phillies would have hoped when they signed him back in December, and now we probably will not see Brad Keller in a Phillies uniform for a very long time, if not ever again at this point, because he has a UCL tear in his elbow. I would think, and it's expected that he would undergo Tommy John at some point. A tear is a really severe injury. He's going to have to get surgery at some point. It's just a question of when. Realistically, he won't come back this season. I would be shocked if he comes back even realistically it'd be the middle towards the end of next season, right? So it really just doesn't seem like it's worked out great with Brad Keller and the Phillies. He had a 4.02 ERA in his 32 games of the season. He was supposed to be that setup guy for Johan Duran. Hasn't really worked out. He was out for a while, got activated, but that didn't pitch. So the Phillies knew that something was up, and it comes out on Thursday that he will be missing the rest of this season and then most of next season. So it's a big blow for a Phillies bullpen that can't really take that many more blows this season. And you talk about the team needs that the Phillies have. They have, I would say, 3 main needs looking into this trade deadline, this 2-week stretch now that the Phillies have to make some moves. First one, the biggest one I would say, is a back-end starter. Your second one is relievers, and your third is a right-handed outfielder. Let's start with the starters. Alan Rangel has been a very good pitcher in AAA. He was good last year for a little bit when he came up. This year hasn't been the same. He has a 5.40 ERA in his 6 games this season, and he gave up 5 runs against the Mets in the series finale. It felt like the minute the Mets took the lead that the Phillies were out of the game, which is not a really good sign. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And you just need a guy like that to eat innings. But at the same time, that's not going to help you win games. The Phillies have made a couple trades for starters in the past couple years. 2022, you trade for Noah Syndergaard in that World Series run. 2023, you trade for Michael Lorenzen. He has 2 of the greatest games by a Phillies pitcher back-to-back, I would say, ever. 8 shutout in Miami and then a no-hitter in his next start against the Nationals. You have 2024, they don't really make a trade for a starter necessarily. They have Kobe Allard, who comes in when Ranger Suarez was down injured. Suarez never really got back to his full health, and then you saw how it played out in the postseason. And then last year, same case, they didn't really trade for any starters. Again, health wasn't all the way there. Zach Wheeler goes down with his injury in August. Christopher Sanchez Luzardo pitched well in games 1 and 2, but he just ran out of pitchers at a point where in game 5, if the Phillies would have gotten to a game 5, realistically, you would have been throwing out Ranger Suarez or Aaron Nola on what is essentially 2 days rest because they started game 3, they did the piggyback. And you also had to go out and sign Walker Buehler at the end of the season for a guy just to get more starter depth. So this year, the Phillies do have to go out and get more starting pitching. It's just going to be who and not if. The question is, will the Phillies go for the big splash like a schoolboy, or are they going to go for like a more lower towards the bottom of the totem pole type of less controllable, probably a free agent after this season, veteran guy? There's a guy like Michael Wacha who's been an option floated out for the Phillies if the Royals decide to move on from him. He's had a really good season for Kansas City, who has been very disappointing this season. You have a guy who's a veteran presence. He was with the Cardinals way back in the day when they went on their runs. You have a guy who has pitched in the postseason before, pitched in big games before, a right-handed pitcher who could give innings, but also get outs and pitch quality innings, which is what you need. So Michael, and he also has an extra year, so it's not like he's a free agent after the season. Michael Wacha could be a perfect fit for the Phillies when you look at the back end starter. You have a guy like, let's say you want to make a really big splash and go and get Joe Ryan from the Minnesota Twins if they decide to sell. You have a guy who has an extra year of control. He has a mutual option after this season. And you're getting a guy who's been really, really consistent over these last 2 years, the best pitcher for the Twins, even though they haven't been the best team necessarily, but he's been the best pitcher on the Minnesota Twins. He's been a really good starting pitcher. He made the All-Star team for the second straight year. So I feel like he could be another option that you look at if you don't want to go with the biggest fish on the sea, which it doesn't even look like he's probably going to get traded anymore. I would think Tarek Skubal's going to stay in Detroit. They've been playing much better baseball recently. The Phillies just beat them 2 out of 3 in the series. But again, they've just been playing. You've been able to see in Detroit they've been playing better baseball. So it's just good to see that Skubal's going to stay put. But for the Phillies, now you got to pivot potentially. I don't think they're ever in on Skubal like that. But again, it's going to be a pivot. You got to figure out who are we going to get, because you need to get somebody. Andrew Painter hasn't really worked out. You can't call him up yet again this year. I feel like you got to let him wait the rest of the year, the minor leagues. Maybe in 2027 you go out and you call him back up and try to give him another chance. But I just think that experiment should be over for the season. You have a guy like Gage Wood down in Double-A. I think you leave him there or call him up to Triple-A. I don't think you bring him up all the way to the majors, Double-A to major leagues. I just don't think that's the wisest move to make for the Phillies, and for, more importantly, for Gage Wood. Give him more time to develop as a pitcher, as a starter, go a little longer as a starter. Feels like the Phillies are kind of trying to transition him into a reliever. His starts have been getting less and less, but I think he will end up being realistically a starting pitcher for the Phillies. It's just not rushing him, right? And they also look at the deadline. Let's say the Phillies don't trade him. It doesn't make sense to call him up in August. It makes sense if anything, it would be like a late September call up. If not, you just wait again until 2027, 2028 to call up a guy like Gage Wood so he can get a full year of Major League Baseball under his belt, not just a couple weeks and then boom, you're right into the postseason. I just don't think that sets guys like Gage Wood up for success. I don't think Andrew Painter is in the best position for success if the Phillies call him back up. You got to go outside the organization. You got to trade for somebody. It doesn't matter who you really get. You just need to get somebody. It'd be even better if it's a right-handed starting pitcher, because you only really have 2 of those guys. You don't know if you're going to have Aaron Nola throw in a postseason game. The Phillies are going to need all 4 this year. Last year, they only needed to go with 3 starting pitchers. This year, they're going to have to go with 4. They don't have the off day in between games 1 and 2. And how it's panning out right now, the Phillies will not be getting a bye, so they will be playing in the wild card. So you potentially either have 2 or 3 games in the wild card, and then that Saturday, you're going to be starting the division series, where realistically your game 1 wild card starter would go on that Sunday of the division series. But the biggest thing for the Phillies, like I said, you just need to go out and get another starter. You got to get another guy to put in that rotation. The Phillies already have a really good rotation, but you got to level it up. You got to make it better. And the Phillies, that's probably I would say, their second biggest concern. I would say their biggest concern right now should definitely be their bullpen. It's just not stable at all. You can't really rely on the bullpen at all right now for the Phillies, outside of a couple guys like I talked about earlier. Outside of those 3 that I mentioned earlier, it's not really a reliable bullpen. This season so far, Alvarado has a 6.62 ERA in 40 games. Tanner Banks has a 7.14 ERA in 28 games, so he's currently on the injured list. I talked about Brad Keller. He's out for the season realistically. He had a 4 ERA in 32 games. Tim Mesa has been really good so far this season, but he struggled of recently. 3.71 ERA in his 38 games, but he has a 6.48 ERA in his last 7 games. And Chase Sugar, who started off the season really well, has a 4.65 ERA in 27 games. He had a 10 ERA in his last 7, and that includes after 2 scoreless innings against the Mets in his most recent outing. The bullpen needs a lot of help. And you look around the league and the teams that are selling, you don't see a lot of bullpen help. Right now, I would say the teams that are realistically going to be sellers for teams open for business are Cincinnati, the Mets, the Giants, the Rockies, the Royals, and the Angels and the A's. I would say those are the 7 teams most definitely selling. That list could definitely grow. You have teams like Houston, Minnesota, teams like who could fall out of the playoffs, Toronto. You have teams who could fall out of the playoff picture in between now and the deadline. You have a team like San Diego, right? Teams that could definitely fall out of the postseason picture in between now and the next 2 weeks. But right now, there really aren't that many relievers to go around. The best name is Luke Weaver on the market from the New York Mets. If the Phillies traded for Luke Weaver, that would be a really, really, really big piece to put in the back end of the bullpen. That name is starting to get floated around over this past weekend. People are saying the price is going to be, the price tag is going to be high for a guy like Luke Weaver, but I think it might be worth it considering how good he's been in the past, how good he was in the postseason a couple years ago with the Yankees. It's just, I think it's worth it. Even if it's, the price tag's high, you have him under control for another year after this. I think you got to chop at the bit and get a guy who could go out and shove like Luke Weaver out of the back end of the bullpen, a really dominant duo. Him and Durant, I think, would be a really good duo out of the back end of the Phillies bullpen. You also look like a guy like AJ Minter out of the Mets bullpen as well. You have a guy who's a lefty who's pitched in the postseason before, postseason pedigree with Atlanta, was a World Series champion with Atlanta, right? You have a guy who's pitched in big moments against the big teams. You have a guy who could go out and get out of anything you need to get out of. Eddie's a lefty. What the Phillies don't really have is a left-handed reliever who they could go to. So I think those are probably your 2 best options right now. When you look at the bigger picture, there's other guys who pop up like Antonio Sensatella from the Colorado Rockies. But again, you want a guy who you're going to be able to get shut down innings from. But at the same time, you would like a lefty. You would like a guy with control. That's where the Mets might be the perfect trade partner. I just don't see the Phillies making a move of that level with the New York Mets in the next 2 weeks. But I think the Phillies need to hone in on finding a guy or 2 guys even for the back end of the bullpen to really help this team take the next step. Because you look at the last couple of years of who the Phillies have gotten as bullpen upgrades, it hasn't always worked out the best. Last year was obviously the Phillies' most successful year, going out and getting Durant, one of the best in baseball, one of the best closers in baseball. Surprisingly, just made his first All-Star appearance, but he has been incredible throughout his entire career, from Minnesota now to Philadelphia. So they make the big splash. 2024 didn't work out as well. They go out and get Estevez, trade kind of 2 of their top prospects, and it didn't work out. But you look at, when it comes to trading prospects, you got to look at the risk reward, because the Phillies traded who were considered 2 of their top prospects, Sam Algieri and George Klassen, for Carlos Estevez. Estevez wasn't great in Philly, but those 2 guys haven't really panned out in LA either. You got to chop at the bit and trade your prospects. Even if it's not the popular thing to do, even if it doesn't feel like the right thing to do, it might seem like the Phillies have lost the trade at that time, but trading your prospects, it has to be the best move. You have a guy like Mick Abel, who is currently injured. He's pitching well for Minnesota, but he's currently injured. And Eduardo Taiz is still a couple years away from being the guy who would be a future catcher in the major leagues. And you got a guy like Johan Durant, who's been, again, one of the best closers in baseball since you traded for him. So you look at just everything that stacks up. You have to chop at the bit, and you have to trade your prospects while you can to help this team win now, because this team is a win-now team. Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, JT Realmuto, Zach Wheeler, All of them are getting up there in age. You're getting to the point where you don't have that many years left with this core. Alec Boehm's a free agent after this season. Bryson Stott's a free agent after next season. Brandon Marsh is a free agent after next season. Durant even is a free agent after next season. So you have to chop at the bit at the core you have to make that core better, and sometimes you do have to sacrifice that prospect pool. That's where the Phillies are right now. They're gonna have to trade some of their top guys. It depends on who they can trade away. The prospect pool isn't the best right now for the Phillies. Last time I checked, it was ranked around 22nd in all of Major League Baseball. But you gotta find who you can trade, and realistically, you're gonna have to ship them away to get the guy you want at the deadline. But again, it's sometimes it's worth the risk. You gotta. It's a risk reward thing. You don't win titles without trading prospects. It's very rare to be able to win a title and not really make moves at the deadline and not trade some of your better prospects just to make the team better. But you're gonna have to separate yourself from some of these guys. And it comes into a guy like a Dante Nori, and as an outfielder, you might have to trade him. Even if you don't want to, you might have to. It's not by how you want to. It might be out of necessity. Because you look at the outfield, it's not great right now. You have Brandon Marsh, who's had a very good season overall, but he's struggled in the last couple weeks. You have a guy like Derek Hill. He's been very good since coming to Philadelphia, but he's not playing every day. The Phillies haven't really been starting him against right-handed pitchers. Then you have a guy like Justin Crawford, who's a rookie. He hasn't been horrible, but again, it hasn't been what you could have wished for from a guy who's your top prospect. Around 649 OPS, 256 average. And the average is good. The OPS isn't great. Big concern for Crawford was his ground ball rate. Can you translate the extra base hits into long balls, into other hits? He hasn't been able to do that really. He has 2 home runs this season in 91 games. So again, it hasn't been necessarily great for Justin Crawford. Defensively, he ranks very low. He hasn't been a bad outfielder necessarily, but defensively, statistically wise, he's been horrible. But when you look at just baseball and the eye test, Justin Crawford's been a very serviceable defender in center field, right? So you just got to look at what do you move around. You want to keep him in center field. You want to help him develop because he's going to be your future. No matter what happens, he's going to be your future outfielder. He's going to be your future center fielder. You want to help him develop, but at the same time, you have a guy like Gabriel Ricones Jr., who you called up from AAA, who hasn't been great either in his 23 games. It's been limited action, but again, he's got limited action because he has produced at a level to get playing every day. He has a 469 OPS in 23 games, 167 average, right? The numbers could be there for Ricones. He has a swing that looks perfect for Citizens Bank Park. He has a powerful swing, but again, he only has 2 home runs in those 23 games. He showed signs of he could be a guy who could give you a lot of pop, but at the same time, those signs haven't come through consistently, which is what you need if you're going to be winning games and winning with a core and with him in the lineup. Right, so you have a guy down in AAA, Brian De La Cruz. You just added him to the 40-man roster. He's a guy who you could end up calling up after the deadline. Let's say you can't get a big deal done at the deadline. You call him up after the deadline. He killed the Phillies for a very long time. I remember I did a game a couple years ago. I streamed it on this YouTube channel. And he had a couple big hits against the Phillies when he was with Miami. He tended to do that a lot for the Marlins, but now you have a guy who has a really good right-handed bat. You just look at what he could potentially bring to a lineup at the bottom, who's played in a couple big games. He was on the Marlins postseason team back in 2023. So I think you just look at a guy like him as a potential option to call up. You have a guy like Otto Kemp, who's still down in AAA. You have a guy like Felix Trea, who's in AAA. All these guys can still play the outfield. So you just got to look at your options, and you got to really see how do you make the outfield better? Because that's the biggest weakness. You're going to really touch the infield. You have Alec Boehm at third. He's not going to move. You have Stott at second. He's not going to really move. And obviously you have your pillars, Harper at first and Turner at short. So you're not going to really move those. But again, you have a guy in the outfield. You have the biggest weakness is probably your right fielder. With Adolis Garcia going down with his injury, his season being over. So it's just a question of what the Phillies do at the deadline and how can they make it work for them. they might already be making some of their big moves. They did make a big move this morning, last night. It was broke by Gage Wood. So what can he do? He's a great pitcher, and now he's going to be a breaking news reporter too. But it was reported and now confirmed that the Phillies are recalling Alex McFarland from Double-A Reading. He's one of their top prospects, right-handed reliever. He's been really good this season for Reading, really, really good. His fastball is really good. A 2.06 ERA in 32 games for the Fighting Phils. They called him up already this season. That's what people do forget. They did call him up on April 24th after they released Tyler Walker, and then they optioned him the next day. That was just really to have an extra arm just in case before they brought back Zach Wheeler. But now they're calling him up, and the question was, how long were the Phillies going to wait? The question, I think a lot of people expected the Phillies to wait until after the deadline, just in case they were like, oh, let's maybe he could be a big piece in the trade to get a big guy on the market, like potentially even a Mason Miller. Right, but the Phillies decide now is the best time to call him up from the minors to give him an opportunity in the major leagues. The Phillies have kind of worked. It's kind of worked out over the last couple of years. Phillies calling up prospects to be relievers. The biggest one is Orion Kerkering. I mean, he was really good when the Phillies called him up in the late September of 2023, and just 2 weeks later, he was pitching in the postseason. He pitched well for the Phillies in big moments. So he's still pitching well for the Phillies. So you have a guy like McFarland. You got to hope he makes an impact. You got to hope he pitches well. So it still keeps his trade value up too, just in case the Phillies want to pivot and move him at the deadline. So it's going to be big for to see what he does over whenever he makes his debut. He's going to be added to the active roster. Question is, what is the corresponding move? I think that's the big question, right? That the you got to look at for the Phillies, right? Is it Lazar? Who is it? Seth Johnson? Who's going to be the corresponding move for who's the corresponding move for McFarland? But it's a really big moment to see how he's going to perform when, I would say, not the lights are brightest, but when it's the pressure's on, because the race is heated up in the National League East. Since I last came and was on a podcast, the Braves have really had a really, really, really bad month of June, and the Phillies capitalized on it. They made the division lead now only 3 games. Only 3 games back of Atlanta, and they still have 7 games against the Braves remaining, 4 of them being at Citizens Bank Park. And for the Phillies, it's a positive side to be able to gain ground on a team like the Braves. And you just gotta grind them out. You gotta grind them down, grind them out as you go through these next couple of weeks. You want to try to get them to a point where it's 2 games, where it's even down to 1 game, and you're going into that Labor Day weekend at Citizens Bank Park with an opportunity to take the lead going into the final month of the season. At the end of the day, right now, you're going to be fighting for if you're going to be having the 3 seed or if you're going to have realistically the 5 seed at this point. But if you close ground on Atlanta, that means you will close ground on Chicago. So it'll either be 3 or 4 or 5. So if you're the Phillies, you're looking at, we've been a better team at home most of the time. We've played better in the postseason at home. You gotta say that it's more important to win the division and have home wild card games. But on that same token, if you go in a position right now, they would go to Chicago for the wild card. They're a game and a half back of the Cubs. The Cubs hold the season series 6-1. They kind of dominated the Phillies, but this was all during the Rob Thompson time of this season before they made Don Mattingly the interim manager. You just look at what you could do against Chicago. You realistically start Jesus Luzardo in game 1 of the wild card series, which is crazy. But again, he has been your best road pitcher, sub-2 ERA on the road this season. You go with him on the road, potentially games 1 in that series, and then a game 2 start in the division series. You just look at what you could do against Chicago, but again, it's so much easier to play at home than it is on the road in the postseason. Get that home comfort. The only place you beat Chicago this season was at home. And again, it would be a favorable matchup with Chicago dealing with all their injuries. But you look at potential 3 seed matchup, you could be facing the Marlins, who aren't really a team to be worried about in the postseason. A team like St. Louis, who again I would say isn't really a team to be worried about in the postseason, even though the Phillies haven't faced St. Louis yet. They lead them by 3 games. They have 6 games remaining against them, 3 in Philly, 3 in St. Louis. So you have to be that much worried about the Cardinals necessarily. You haven't faced them yet. You don't know what they look like. But again, they're not a I wouldn't call them a threat to the Phillies right now. Pittsburgh isn't a threat to the Phillies. They played 7 games. The Phillies won the season series pretty dominantly. They beat Paul Skeens twice this season. It's just you don't see Pittsburgh as necessarily a threat. You see a team like the Dodgers as a threat. You see the team as the Brewers, I would say, as a threat. And that's probably about it. You can put Atlanta and Chicago probably on your same level. And then the teams under you are going to stay under you. You have a team, you still have 3 games up on St. Louis, on Miami, on Pittsburgh. You have 5 games up on a team like Washington. You have 3.5 up on a team like Arizona. You really wouldn't want to face Arizona in the postseason because they got the stars, they got the experience, right, to go in and win 2 out of 3 on the road or 2 straight on the road in a postseason in a wild card situation. But again, you're in a position where your best bet is to win the division and go through that. And you've put yourselves in a position to win a division title this season because of the work you did in June, now into July, closing the gap with Atlanta, which a lot of people said the division race was over, but now it's a much different race. The Phillies have closed the gap. If they continue to close the gap going into their last 7 games against Atlanta, they'll be in a much better position going into the postseason. All right, now it's time to hit the rewind button a little, go back to All-Star Week. What a great week it was in Philadelphia. I was down there just taking in everything. It was really cool to see Philadelphia essentially become the baseball hub of the world. Everybody you could think of was there, every legend, every player. And I thought it was really cool to see Philadelphia get that spotlight for the first time in over 30 years. It's just, I would be shocked if it took another 30 years for an All-Star game to come back to Citizens Bank Park with how incredible everything was just all around. The gate is one of the highest in All-Star history. Look at the ticket prices, 5 times the amount of Atlanta, 5 times the amount of Texas. It's the most they've ever sold at an All-Star Village when it comes to merch. So numbers-wise, the MLB did great. And the Phillies were represented well, too. Got 6 All-Stars this season. Zach Wheeler was criminally robbed of an All-Star appearance, even though he's probably been arguably the second best pitcher in the National League this season. He didn't want to get disrespected, so he did take the 5th option to be an All-Star, which I think is completely the right move that Zach Wheeler did. But at the end of the day, the Phillies had 6 All-Stars. You have Christopher Sanchez, who started the game, didn't look great. That's a little bit concerned for Christopher Sanchez. He had that really bad start in Kansas City, not a great start in the All-Star game. Fatigue is a big thing. You're going to hit a career high in innings pitched for Sanchez, so you got to control how much he is pitching down the stretch. You have Mizorowski, who didn't pitch for a little bit because of fatigue. Maybe you do the same thing for Sanchez just to not have his arm overworked, considering you're going to need him the whole postseason. He's going to be your horse. He's going to be your guy all postseason. So you got to make sure his arm is going to be good. You don't want to overwork him. He starts tonight for the first time out of the All-Star break. But again, not the best look considering he gave up 3 runs took 30 pitches, gave up 3 runs to fellow All-Stars of the American League. So that's not a great start for Sanchez. But it's fine. It's the All-Star game. It's an exhibition game at the end of the day. Jesus Luzardo pitched. He looked very good. Duran, the same thing. Again, they both were very efficient. Harper only got 1 at-bat. He struck out in his only at-bat. Schwarber wasn't able to get a hit. Same thing with Brandon Marsh. And then the biggest thing for the Phillies was the home run derby, I would say. Kyle Schwarber, a miraculous run to the end, but it was stopped by Jordan Walker of the St. Louis Cardinals with one of the most incredible endings to a home run derby. I would say the new format definitely worked. I was skeptical at first, but the format definitely worked. Him taking the lead over Schwarber on that last swing, going 6 for 6 on his last 6 swings. I thought that was really impressive. He deserved the win. It was pretty cool to see him take home the home run derby crown, but it would be even cooler to see Schwarber do it in his home park. But again, it was a really cool home run derby. Harper hyping up the crowd before the derby. Unfortunately, he went out in the first round. Schwarber having his rally in the second and in the finals. So it was just a really cool week of events in Philadelphia. You have the Futures game. You had Gage Wood starting as the starting pitcher in the Futures game. Another really cool thing to see. Just the whole week how it panned out for the Phillies and for their fans and the players. And again, like I said, I would be shocked if it takes another 30 years for an All-Star game to come back to Citizens Bank Park. And really, the last thing I want to touch on is the draft a little bit. The Phillies had a couple selections throughout the draft. I'm not going to hit all of them. I'll do that at a later time. Once the Phillies get all of them signed, once they figure out who's going to be signing. But I'll talk about the first 3 picks the Phillies made at the MLB draft on Saturday, July 12th. Saturday, July 11th. The biggest one is Tyler Spangler, the first round pick for the Phillies. It was at the 36th pick. The Phillies lose 10 slots because of their salary right now. They do lose 10 spots. But again, you get a guy in Spangler. He's 18 years old. He missed the last year of high school. He missed the senior season of high school baseball due to a back issue, which is something the Phillies and their fans have known now a lot this year with back issues, with Aiden Miller having his issue as well, still not appearing in a game this season. But again, Spangler was considered a top 15 prospect in the draft before his injury. So if you get a guy like him healthy and he's going to side with the team, that is a really great opportunity for the Phillies to get a guy, develop him. He's an infielder, more shortstop. He's on the taller end, around 6'4". So you have a guy you could put him at short. You could move him over to third, move him over to second, like you did with most of your shortstop prospects. And you have a guy who I would say has a really high potential for a guy who was drafted at 36. With the MLB draft, it's so weird because most prospects are not going to make their debuts this year. And honestly, most of them won't even make their debuts next year. It's most likely you're going to see most of these guys in 2028. Even if we have baseball next year, you see them at the tail end of the season. Most guys takes them a little bit to make their major league debuts. You're seeing that now, I would say, with the 2024 class. Out of any class, you're seeing that the most. Travis Posada is now in the major leagues. He just got called up this year. J.J. Weatherholt's now in the major leagues. He just got called up this year and just got extended. Chase Burns just got extended. He got called up towards the end of last year. But again, he's blossomed this year. He's an all-star this year. So was Posada. Nick Kurtz made his debut last year, won Rookie of the Year, was an all-star this year. You have a guy, you just see a lot of these guys now making their debuts from the 2024 class. Now you're going to see that again 2025 next year realistically. So again, it's going to take a little bit for these guys to get up to the major leagues. But by the time these guys are ready to go up, especially in Spangler's case, the Phillies are going to be in a much different position than what they are right now. So it's a really good pick, I think, at the first round pick. Second round, Caden Bogenpole. I think it's a really high upside pick. The Phillies thought so too. They liked him so much they had a private workout with him, helped him fix his swing, and they saw the changes at the draft combine. They drafted him with their second pick overall. He has big time power, but there are a little bit concerns. His numbers did drop drastically from his freshman year to his junior year when it comes to home runs at Missouri State. 20 home runs in his freshman year to only 6 in his final season at college in junior year. So that is a little bit of concern for the Phillies. But again, he has time to develop. He's an outfielder, big swing, big guy. I think he's gonna be a really high upside guy for the Phillies coming out of this draft class. And then lastly, the last guy I'm going to talk about today is Ruger Riojas from Texas. The first pitcher the Phillies took in the draft. Phillies do see him as a starter. That's what Brian Barber said, the Phillies head of scouting. Fastball sits 94 to 96, tops out around 98. Also has a splitter, cutter, slider, curveball, two-seamer. So he has a very nice pitch repertoire. But he's going to be a guy, again, the Phillies got to develop. He's not going to be a guy, for example, like a Gage Wood, who the Phillies were able to just throw in. And he honestly just blossomed into a star almost immediately. you're going to have to build them. It's going to be a process. You're going to have to build them up and see what you have really in a guy like Riojas, and a guy like Spangler, and a guy like Bogenpool. The Phillies didn't draft necessarily MLB ready guys. There aren't that many MLB ready guys in the draft to begin with, but the Phillies did draft guys who can make this team better in the next couple of years. So for the most part, that'll wrap up the episode. But again, we got to do the road ahead series preview. The Phillies get ready to host the Dodgers in a rematch of the National League Division Series from a year ago. It starts out on Monday night. Christopher Sanchez is on the mound for the Phillies against Emmett Sheehan for the Los Angeles Dodgers. That game is at 7:10 on ESPN. Big game for the Phillies. Christopher Sanchez did not see the Dodgers when the Phillies were in LA the first time this season. Same thing goes with Sheehan. The Phillies didn't see him, so it'll be a first time seen for each side this season. Tuesday, Eric Lauer will take the mound for the Dodgers against Zach Wheeler. Wheeler's first start out of the All-Star break. Again, he faced the Dodgers the first time around, gave up 4 solo home runs, and the Phillies lost. So was not necessarily at his best, but again, they were all solo home runs. And the Phillies did not face Eric Lauer. He wasn't with the Dodgers when the Phillies were up in LA back at the end of May. And then lastly, on Wednesday, Aaron Nola will take the mound to cap off the series against Justin Robleski. That game starts at 6:05. Nola, again, this would be a second start out of the All-Star break. He had a pretty solid one against the Mets. Robleski dominated the Phillies in his last outing when they played back in May. 7 innings, gave up 1 run, which was a Kyle Schwarber home run to center field. But besides that, was basically flawless. He was an all-star last week in Philadelphia, so he's having a really good breakout season for the Dodgers. But that is what the series looked like for the Dodgers and the Phillies. A big-time series going down in South Philadelphia over the next 3 days. But that'll wrap up this episode of the Phillies Fan Podcast. Thank you guys for watching this one. Make sure to stay tuned for more content throughout the rest of the week. We'll be back later this week. Big series again. The Yankees in town. We'll preview that on Thursday. But thank you guys for watching. I'm your host, Jaden Harper, and I'll see you in the next one.